A very exciting day. The fine folks at IK Multimedia have not only just released their incredible new AXIO1 audio interface. I have another video I released this morning about the product release, and I will link to that below. Go check it out. Anybody who's looking for a small, budget-minded audio interface that's bus-powered, $129.99 US or euros, that will allow you to utilize the entire Tonex ecosystem and create your own tone models. It's got an amp out built in. Just an incredible little audio interface. It comes with Amplitude SE and Tonex SE. Just hard to beat. Anyways, that's not the point of this video. You can go watch my other video. They've also released a new Tonex software update and a new Tonex pedal firmware, and I have to say I've never been so excited. I have not been able to talk about this until now. I've hinted to folks that there was a fix coming for this whole input trim debate. I've been attacked online about this. All I was ever trying to do was help people to understand what was going on, to get the most of their Tonex pedal, and so it was working right for them. I was never trying to tell anybody how they needed to work. Something folks need to realize, I truly have other people's best interests in mind. I want them to get the most out of their pedals. This is not about me. I also have no ability to force anybody to work a certain way. If you're working, and I've said this many times, if you're working a certain way and it is working for you and you're happy, who am I to tell you to change that? But I am going to tell you the truth about what's happening. Now, sometimes when dealing with companies, I'm not at liberty to discuss certain details. I will never say something that I've been asked not to talk about at that moment. So what happened? Let me explain the whole input trim issue and how this came about. I had a Tonex pedal far in advance, and I got to work with it for a lot longer than anybody else who received one after it was released. I'd created many, many tone models, so I knew the process. I was very aware of how this all worked. Now, for myself, when utilizing audio interfaces, and I've owned a lot. Just right now in my studio, I upgraded to an Audient Evo 16 audio interface for my main system. Before that, I had a Focusrite Claret Plus 4 Pre. Nice little audio interface. I have a Line 6 Helix. I have a Line 6 Pod Go. I have a Line 6 HX Stomp. When I plug into any of those instrument inputs, I seldom adjust the gain. I might move it a dB and a half at most, because I want that instrument to be an instrument level. And what I do when I have a new audio interface is I utilize my reamp box and my splitter box, and I run tests through it so that I know that when I'm plugging into the front of any guitar amp, that I am getting the same level when I plug straight into my instrument input. And I won't go into details on that. I did a video about instrument input previous to this. I'll link to it below. Go watch that. And I talk a little bit more about this. So what I found is something, for instance, like the Line 6 Helix. When I plug into that 1 mega ohm guitar input and then capture that DI'd guitar and then reamp that back out through my Tonex capture box with no attenuation, I get the exact same thing as plugging straight into my guitar amp. Now, with the Focusrite Claret Plus 4 Pre, I needed to add maybe a dB and a half of gain to the instrument input. So little that if I didn't do it, it really wasn't a game changer. Obviously it would hit the front of the guitar modeler, whether I was using Tonex or some other software modeler. It would obviously hit it with a little bit less level so it wouldn't break up and saturate as much, but not to a degree that you would even probably notice unless you were comparing the two side by side. But I always did calibrate it just so it was up just a little tiny bit, so it was very, very accurate. So that I knew when I was plugged into my instrument input and playing a tone model I just created, that was going to be the same as when I plug straight into my guitar amp. Now, this has nothing to do with what guitar you're using, and I'm not talking about active pickups, I'm talking about passive pickups. I have many guitars here in the studio. Some have higher output pickups, some have lower output pickups. I choose the guitar I use based off of what I know about it and how it's going to interact with the amp. Whether I plug into my Dr. Z Z-Rec or a Marshall amp or a Fender amp, those amps are going to react to those guitars different. I may not grab my Vigier Excalibur with a Tone Zone bridge pickup to play into my Fender Deluxe amp because it's going to hit the front too hard. I may want to just grab my Vigier Expert Strat style guitar, and that's going to interact with it. So the guitar is sort of irrelevant if you're talking about passive pickups. We want that guitar to interact with the tone model, and Tonex is going to take those differences of the amps into account in the modeling process so that when I plug into Tonex, I want it to react as the amp reacts. And it does. It really does. It does an incredible job, as we all know. So I'm going to let my guitar be the guitar it is without going in and saying, oh, I have a Strat style guitar with lower output pickups. I'm going to crank this instrument input level up really high so I hit the front of the amp model harder. I don't understand that. Again, everybody can do whatever they want to do. I'm not telling you what to do. Do whatever you want, do whatever works for you. But I don't understand it. I want to be able to then hit that tone model maybe with my other Vigia Excalibur with a higher output pickup so that that model reacts to that guitar. That's my take on it. I'm not looking to argue with anybody about it. If you want to do it different, then you should do that. So here's what happened. I found that I created a tone model and I loved it. I compared it to the real guitar. I reamped the same guitar performance through the real amp, compared it to the tone model I captured, and I was extremely happy with how close it was. And I'm going to give you some audio examples in a second. Then I would load that same tone model onto Tonex pedal, plug into Tonex pedal with my input trim at 0 at the default setting of the old firmware, and it didn't sound like it anymore. It was a boosted version of itself. It was saturated. If it was a clean tone, it was now breaking up. It wasn't acting in the way that it should have with the guitar I was using. I wasn't getting what I wanted out of it. And I'm going, wow, I had this beautiful clean tone I just set up and now it's distorted. It's saturating. What is going on? I racked my brains over this and I started talking to the folks at IK Multimedia about this. And something you got to realize, I'm in touch with them all the time. I've worked with them on a number of products. They're wonderful, wonderful people. They're really, really great people to deal with. I've become friends with them and they're really wonderful to throw ideas off of, and they're very responsive to new ideas. So at first, I asked, what is going on? But I didn't really get an answer that satisfied me. I was just kind of told, maybe turn your instrument input up. And I was like, no, because I have my system calibrated so that my instrument input on my audio interface is acting like when I plug into the guitar. Turning that up's not going to do anything. That's just going to mess everything up. I'm not going to have the tone model sound like the model I just captured. So I finally sent them some audio samples which showed exactly what was going on. Now, I'm going to play you these. First is the real guitar amp, my Dr. Z Rec Junior guitar amp. I love this amp. This is part of my Rect Z Ultimate tone model bundle. I'll have a link to that below. This is one of my favorite sets of tone models. It's available at my website, and there's also a free sample of it up on ToneNet. I'll have all those links below. And I sent them basically the sound of that amp with my guitar plugged straight into it. I was reamping the same performance. And that's going to be our baseline. That's going to be the tone we're after. Tonex's job is to make the tone model sound like that. There's no arguing that. A guitar plugged into that sounds like this. Doesn't matter the guitar. If it's a higher output guitar, then it's going to hit the front of that harder and it's going to saturate more. If it's a lower output guitar, it's going to be cleaner. So the guitar is not a part of this. Whatever guitar we decide to use, we plug into it, the amp is going to react to that guitar the way it's going to react to it. And Tonex will capture this. So I sent them that. Then I sent them the tone model I created from that exact same setting. I had it mic'd up. I had my whole signal chain. Nothing changed. Now, I set my, at the time, Focusrite Claret plus 4 pre instrument input at 0. Now, I've already told you it does need about a dB and a half of more gain to match up to plugging straight into the amp. And that's how I would normally set it. But I wanted to illustrate that even if I just plugged into that instrument input with no change, how close it still was to plugging into the guitar amp. So you'll hear there's a slight bit less saturation on that. So let's listen to those. First is the real amp, and then we'll listen to the tone model of that amp, which is going to be hit slightly less, so you'll hear a slight difference in the amount of saturation. Okay, I think everybody will agree that those two sounds are pretty close. Obviously, if I had raised the instrument input just by about a dB or a dB and a half, they would have been identical. And I know that because I did that and I tested that. So the Tonex software is working beautifully. Now, if I go in and crank that instrument level up on that to the point where it's maybe peaking at -5, -4, -6, that tone model sounds totally different. It's broken up, saturated more, and kind of falls apart. Doesn't sound good. It's not really hitting it with the level it wants to see. And this is not just for my tone models. This goes across the board. So what happened now when I would transfer that over to Tonex pedal? Here's where the problem lies. So I sent them the real amp. I sent them the Tonex tone model with the proper instrument input going into the audio interface. Sounds great. Here's what it sounds like when it goes to Tonex pedal. I'll play Tonex software first, then Tonex pedal. Listen to how much more saturated the Tonex pedal sounds. So at that point, they went, oh, okay. So we got into deeper talks about this. And it turns out that the Tonex pedal had an 8.6 dB boost built into it after the analog to digital converter. So basically, when you would plug into an audio interface and be in the range of what a normal instrument input would be, when you transferred that tone model over to Tonex pedal, you're going to have an 8.6 dB clean boost hitting it. Just like going to the amp and putting a clean boost before it, which we all know changes things dramatically. So I did a video about this, but I wasn't really at liberty to talk about the details. But I just wanted to let people know that, you know, there's an input trim in there, and if you dial this back, things are going to work better. They're going to be more accurate. Now, it doesn't mean you have to. If you're happy with it where it was set, then carry on. And I said that at the time, but people got very offended and called me names and called me out on this and called me all sorts of things. But I stuck to my guns. I said, look, there's going to be more clarification on this coming, but, you know, again, nobody wanted to believe it. So now let's listen to what happens when I have Tonex pedal. Then I'll do Tonex pedal with the input trim set down to -13, and then compare that to my Claret Plus 4 pre with the instrument input at 0. So -13 input trim on the old Tonex pedal firmware was very similar to just plugging straight into my Claret Plus 4 pre. That's what these sound like. So you'll notice Tonex pedal sounded fine when that input trim was set way down. Now, like I said, the Focusrite Claret Plus 4 pre did need about a dB or dB and a half of gain added to it to really sound more like the real amp. So, you know, maybe then in Tonex pedal, I would have set that around -11 and everything would have been fine. When we're down to dealing with 1 dB, a dB and a half, it's not going to be a game changer like 8.6 or 9 dB is going to be. So at that point, it was kind of hard to debate whether there was a problem with this because this boost was causing a problem. Now, when I did a video talking about this, you cannot believe the response. I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, I lost count, hundreds of people contact me and say, thank you so much. I was about to sell my Tonex pedal. I cannot believe it. Some friends of mine who are very big in the industry contacted me and said, man, couldn't figure out what was going on. I thought I was losing my mind. So I wasn't the only one. So many people said this fixed everything for me and off they went. Now, there was a whole bunch of people just to argue with me about this. Now, what's going to happen is if you're the type of person who would plug into an audio interface to utilize Tonex software and leave your instrument input kind of within the range it really should be at to represent that instrument, then you would have had a problem with the built-in boost on the pedal. You would have basically had to go turn that input trim down to get what you wanted. Now, if you're somebody who is used to working by just cranking that instrument input up all the way, then guess what? You're not going to notice the difference. And like I said many times, carry on. This video isn't for you. This problem isn't about you. Carry on, keep working if you're happy. Also, if you're an extremely high gain player, the difference between unboosted and boosted is probably going to be much less because you're so saturated already. You're not even going to really notice that extra boost. You're going to go, great, this is awesome. I have more distortion. But if you're dealing with something like the tone I was just playing you out of something like the Z-Rec, which is a clean or edge of breakup or not super high gain, it basically destroyed your tone by plugging in and having this unwanted almost 9 dB boost. So how has this been fixed? Well, it's been fixed with a firmware update. After many discussions with IK, we came to some conclusions of how the best way to approach this would be. So now what is going to happen, and this is the most important part of this video, and everybody must listen to this simply so that you're going to be able to use your Tonex pedal properly. When you go into input trim now, the 0 setting is going to be equivalent to the old, let's say, -9-ish setting. It is now at 0 dB on the input trim going to act more like most audio interfaces when we just plug into the instrument input. It's going to give us that proper instrument level range. So it's going to be much more like plugging straight into our guitar amp in real life. So now, if you were using these settings of -10, -11, -12 before, you're going to want to go up and set your input trim to 0. Upon firmware update, whatever you were set at before, it's going to add about 9 dB to that. So you don't even have to change it. It's going to fix it for you. At least that's what happened when I did my update. If you were the type of person who was using this at the old 0 dB setting, you will now be set automatically up to +9 or +8-ish. I believe it's around +9. So nothing's really changed in the way this is going to work, but we want to be aware of that because now if you go in and go down to that -10, which has always seemed like a weird place to be, a weird number, you're going to be really low and you're not going to get what you wanted of it. So I would say for the vast majority of people who are used to working with an instrument input set at the proper instrument level, you're going to want to just go in, set your input trim at 0 and leave it alone. Out of the box, I believe the default setting is going to be +8 or +9, just to keep things the same for folks who are used to it the old way. And there's also going to be a little indicator in there, which I'm kind of ignoring. It's telling you whether you're low or high or okay. But I would just ignore that. For those who want to use it, that's fine. I would just simply now set my Tonex pedal at 0, and now we're going to be much more within the range of where it should be. I'm so happy I can finally talk about this. I'm so happy I can set this to bed, and I don't want to discuss it anymore, and I don't want to argue with anybody about it. I'm not telling anybody how to work. I never was. But folks get very insulted when you try and put a piece of information out there to help them to get the most out of it if it disagrees with their already existing bias. I'm telling everybody again, if you disagree with me on this, that's fine. I'm not interested in discussing it. Carry on working in whatever manner works for you. Carry on. I don't lose sleep over it. I don't even think about it. People think I worry about this stuff. I don't. I just carry on with my business. But I really do want people to get the most out of their devices. And for that reason, now we have some clarification on what is actually going on inside a Tonex pedal. And I'm so happy to be able to share this information with you. All right, so that's what's new in the Tonex pedal update. Thank you guys so much for bearing with me through all of that. So now let's actually go on the pedal and see what these settings look like and what we can do with them. So let's actually take a look and see what is different within Tonex pedal. So really not that much once we update the firmware. But here's what is going to be different that will not be noticeable on the surface. We need to go back into global settings to our input trim control. Now, doesn't look too much different here, but we still have the plus and minus 15 dB, but now the settings are different. You're going to notice now that a 0 dB setting here is going to be much closer to the -9, -10 dB setting that was on the previous firmware. The reason is, as I've already stated, there was an 8.6 dB boost built into the Tonex pedal after the analog to digital converter. So it was essentially boosting that. So it's like putting a clean boost before every tone model. This is why so many folks, myself included, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people contacted me saying that fixed everything when I cut that back by about -10, -11, -12, -9, however much it was for them to get them in the range that was going to work for them. Now we can have this set at 0. I can't stress this enough. Go back into your Tonex pedal, set this at 0. 0 and you will be good. This is going to be much more in line now with most audio interfaces on the market. When we just plug into the instrument input, it's going to be in that acceptable range, much like plugging a guitar straight into a guitar amplifier. Now, there is one more interesting feature here that has been added that is fine, but I'm not really going to pay too much attention to it, but it could work for some folks. What you will notice when I strum is a word comes up on the screen. It says low. Now, as I raise the input trim, it'll give me an OK signal. This is basically now an input trim meter that the folks at IK Multimedia have added to Tonex pedal to tell you where they sort of feel that this should be. Now you'll notice it goes from low to OK to high. Personally, I would ignore this. I would set my pedal at 0, which is going to be much more in line with plugging this into any other modeler like a Helix or an HX Stomp and any other audio interface. It's going to give us that standard audio instrument inputs. So the +8 or +9 setting now on the input trim is going to be equivalent to the old 0 dB setting. So anybody who is used to plugging into an audio interface, cranking their input trim up to get their guitar up peaking around -5, -4, -3, just below clipping, which I, again, do not agree with. I don't think that's a good way to work. They will want to set this back to the +8. There is no right and wrong here. You work however you want. I'm not here, again, to tell you how you need to work. I never was trying to do that. I wanted people to realize what was going on. Many people thought I was crazy. I knew there was this boost built into it. I wasn't at liberty to speak of it at the time. Now I can. So that is what was going on. So basically, in a nutshell, anybody who's used to plugging into an audio interface, such as a Focusrite Claret, or plugging into an HX Stomp or a Line 6 Helix, we would just want to leave this input trim now at 0. That's going to be kind of equivalent to the old -9 or -10 setting. Leave it at 0. Off you go. Your tone models are going to sound great, and your guitar is going to interact with Tonex pedal much like it would plugging into a normal amp. If you're somebody who is used to plugging into an audio interface and cranking it up for whatever reason, closer to the clipping point or to much higher peaks on your dBFS meter, then you're going to want to raise this. So the low and high and OK, I would take with a grain of salt. You're going to want to just work in whatever way you wanted to work before. But if you had a setting of 0 before on your guitar input trim on your Tonex pedal, you'll now want to go set that up around +8 or +9. And I believe that's going to be the new default setting for it when you just get a new pedal or reset your pedal back to factory settings. This is going to be set up around +8 or +9. For anybody who is normally used to using their audio interface just at a normal instrument input, which would be more like actually plugging into a guitar amp, just turn that back down to 0. Leave it, forget about it, and then you can use on a per preset basis your gain control to decide how much input you want on a per preset basis to decide how much drive or saturation you're going to want on that particular preset or tone model. All right, now let's head over to Tonex software and take a look at what's new with it. Not a whole lot, but what is new is that we can now integrate it very nicely with the brand new AXIO1 audio interface, which is going to allow a lot of folks to be able to enter into the ability to create their own tone models with very little hardware other than the AXIO1 audio interface. Okay, so here we are over in the new Tonex software. Not much has changed, but there is one important thing we need to discuss. Earlier today, I released a video of a new product that the fine folks at IK Multimedia have just released, and it is the AXIO1 audio interface. A really wonderful 1-in, 3-out audio interface that's bus powered. It sounds amazing, and it comes in at a price of $129.99 US dollars or euros. I do have an affiliate link below if you want to take a look at that and grab it. I get a little kickback from the folks at IK, and it helps support my channel, and I would greatly appreciate it if you're going to buy one, if you can click through that. So let's say that we want to create a tone model with that. Well, first of all, let's do this. Let's go up and we'll assign that as our audio interface. So here we go, AXIO1. We have our out 1 and our out 2. There is an out 3 amp out that's going to be very important in the tone modeling process. And this little audio interface is going to allow anybody with it to be able to capture their own tone models with no other hardware needed. So we would set our instrument input to the one and only instrument input. Great. So let's say that we wanted to create a tone model. We'll go over to our modeler tab. and we'll click through here. Let's just, for argument's sake, say I'm going to do a guitar amp and cab capture. Now we come over to our audio setup and iRig connections. Now this is where things look a little different. I had a lot of people argue with me when I did a video talking about guitar input levels, and I said the input level that you set your guitar to at your audio interface has no bearing on anything to do with how the tone model is captured. And people argued with me and they told me I was crazy. I've done hundreds of these tone models. It has nothing to do with the capture process. Absolutely nothing. I would just leave it alone to where I always had mine calibrated at. But again, people thought I was nuts here. So here's what proves this. The instrument input was only ever used to audition the tone models after, even though they had you set the level of it in the beginning of the process. Well, now with AXIO1 hooked up, we no longer have to set that instrument level, which shows us that we never really did need the audio instrument input to actually capture the tone model. Sure, we could audition with it and we could play our rig with the live signal coming into it, but it was never needed and it never had any influence on the outcome of the tone model. But the problem is the software would never allow us to get past this page without assigning an instrument input, which would be a problem for the AXIO1 because there's only one input and we're going to need that for our microphone to capture our amplifier. So here's what we do. We have our ASIO driver set to our AXIO1. So I would choose that from my drop-down menu here if we are using it. I would want to set my outputs to out 1 and 2. You notice we have our out 3, which we're going to use. Very, very important piece of the puzzle here. And that's where this comes in. We want to send the test files that Tonex sends to create the tone model and complete the capture process. We need to send that to our guitar amp. Now it has a little reamplification box here. The beautiful thing about AXIO1 is we don't need a reamp box. It has it built into it. This out 3 is going to take these signals. It's going to convert them to the proper impedance and proper output level that the guitar amp rig is going to want to see. So we're going to be all set. We send it out 3. We're going to hit the front of our amp, just like we're plugging a guitar into it. We would mic that amplifier, and then we would send that back into our one and only input on our AXIO1 audio interface. In this case, we would be using the mic preamp. And we would be all set. We're ready to go. That simple. Now we can go past this. We could audition our sounds to set the proper send level that we feel is correct going into our amplifier. I hit next, and then we can use these sound files again to set the proper mic input level so that we're hitting Tonex with the amount of level that it wants to see. We hit next, we do our capture, and we are good. So the AXIO1 has really allowed a lot more people very easy entry into the tone modeling game. I think this is a great addition to the lineup for very little money. It's a really high quality interface. Go watch my video, which I'll link below, that I released this morning about the new release, and I hope that it's something you guys can use. I do have an affiliate link below if you guys are so inclined, you want to grab one. If you don't mind clicking that, it helps to support my channel, and I really do appreciate it. All right, what do you guys think? I hope that you guys enjoyed that, and I hope that finally puts to bed this discussion. I'm not going to get into discussions with anybody else online about this. I also will just ignore anybody who tries to call me names and whatnot as they did in the past. I got absolutely ridiculous how offended so many people got by the fact I was telling people that, you know, the input trim might be the solution to your problem. And they just didn't realize that maybe I knew something that I wasn't at liberty to speak about, even though I told them that. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Enough jabbering from me. Head on over and update your Tonex pedal to the new firmware. Thinking about all the things we talked about today. Go update your Tonex software and go give the new AXIO1 audio interface from the folks at IK Multimedia a look. I don't think you'd be disappointed if you're in the market for a very inexpensive, high quality, great sounding box that's going to allow you to enter the tone modeling Tonex ecosystem ring at a really reasonable entry point. It includes Amplitude SE and Tonex SE as well. Thanks so much for sharing your time with me. Please like the video. Please share this video with as many people as you can. We need to get the word out about what's actually going on with this and how this has been fixed so there's no confusion with it. Please share it with anybody who you think would get some use out of watching it. Also, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. Go hit my IK Multimedia affiliate links below for Tonex pedal, Tonex software, and the new AXIO1 audio interface. It helps to support my channel and allows me to keep doing what I'm doing here. I'll be back soon with some more Tonex content. For now, I'm going to actually leave you with the demo video for one of my favorite tone model bundles, which is my Rect Z Ultimate Tone Models, which are available at the links below at my website and a free sample up on ToneNet. Thanks again so much for sharing your time with me. Ciao for now.